All right, there we are. Okay, cool. Stay.
Let's take our seats. Start. Real quick, we have announcements. First of all, in 2 weeks, on Sunday, the 22nd, starting at noon, we've got a swap meet. Be in the parking lot out back here. Please come. Bring some people, bring some friends, bring some family, bring some cash. That's the 22nd, Sunday the 22nd. Starting at noon, we'll be here until the action.
Are we doing
In November, we are going to be having elections for the year. If you are so inclined, please nominate yourself. I will now introduce current board. I'm the president. My name is Luke. We are missing Nico today. He's our family emergency. He's our vice president, but hopefully he's able to tune in. Modesta in the back.
here?
The secretary. Joey Soria in the other corner. And then going around the room, we've got Matt. Just Joe is at the computer. Man is in the center of the room, not by the computer. Are we missing the rest? Well, missing, we've also got Jason Alla and Larry Schenkel and Justin Coyle.
Oh, okay. I should be writing that down.
Anyways, we're the current board. If you think that we're doing okay, my understanding is that most of us will be on the ballot again, but that's not confirmed. And now, without too much further ado, we've got Ms. Caroline Estes with us today. She's going to be talking to us about the history of women in the hobby. As a special treat, we've also got both hands. And they've been doing lots of work in the past few decades, making some money to donate to some good causes in the conservation of fish, and are definitely their own part of the history of women in the hobby. Thank you. Yes.
Sure here, I'd like to say it's an original work of art by Pamela Marsh. This was the sign for my store, Amazonia Aquariums. And I just use that to start the talk with, so you can see some beautiful artwork. She takes commissions, and if anybody needs any custom fish artwork, Pamela Marsh is really good at that. This is my store, Amazonia Aquariums, and it was opened 92 to 2012, and we were on the side of Interstate 35. And the reason it says live nude fish is I was located in a string of massage parlors that were live nude girl signs, and I had to compete. So live nude fish store just to get attention. And what happened was this sign got stolen. And so I wrote a press release and it was on all the local news. I got so much free publicity around the sign and the story. Because I just wanted to say live news fish on TV, I think. So on the top, it is not very many pretty fish pictures and a lot of words about women and people. So I wanted to lead with a beautiful fish. And this is a freshwater goby, Siphodon ornatus from Sumatra, Indonesia. And what I found interesting, it's from coastal waterways above waterfalls at the coast. And this has nothing to do with anything. I just thought it was a super cool fish. I wanted y'all to say, wow, she has some good fish in that time. This is my turkey coolfish picture. And this is where we're going to start. This woman invented the aquarium. And I think most of us don't know that the aquarium was actually invented by a woman. And the information about her, she was born in 1794 and she invented the aquarium in 1832. And she was a pioneering French marine biologist, and she was born in rural France. And unlike the common at the time, she would learn to read and write, which was not something that women were granted that opportunity then. And she, at 18 years old, walked 250 miles to go to Paris and start her life. And she went with a male cousin as her guardian. Well, along the way, he assaulted her and left her and abandoned her. And here's this 18-year-old woman that had to walk to Paris by herself 200 miles. So she made it, and she had no formal education, although the advantage of being able to read and write. Yeah. And once she got to Paris, she had to create a career. So she started as a dressmaker. And in 1816, she made the wedding gown for the Princess Caroline. And so she did have a career before she got into the fish hobby. In 1818, she married James Power, and they all moved to Sicily. And this is where she started her work with fish. For 25 years, she inventoried the island's ecosystems on Sicily and traveled around and collected samples of the fish. And she wrote a book about the fish of Sicily. And she ended up zooming in on the cephalopods, which are like the octopus and things like that, nautilus. So the way she invented the first aquarium was they had glass boxes for plants. They called them aquariums, but no one had thought to use it for a fish. And so she took a glass box, took a glass box and put it in the ocean, and made it stable where it stayed in the ocean. And then she put her cephalopods in the aquarium in the water so she could study them in their natural habitats. And no one had ever thought to do that before. So it's the first aquarium submerged and anchored.
How big were those boxes?
Well, they didn't really say all that, so I don't know that. But I mean, it had to be pretty good size. I'm fixing to show you a picture of the cephalopod. That's what she was working with, was these critters. And she wrote a book about them. And in 1834, a professor, Carmelo Margavani, wrote a book and credited her with inventing the aquarium. And then she also was credited with systemic application of using the aquarium to study marine life. So she was credited with that in 1834. So that's really an amazing achievement for a woman that wasn't even allowed a formal education. And her first book came out in 1839. Her second book came out in 1842. And she studied mollusks and fossils. And she was the first person to prove that this animal, the nautilus, made its own shell. Before she was started researching, they thought they moved into like a hermit crab, somebody else's shell. And she proved that they actually created the shell. And she got considerable backlash in the scientific community. You know, who's this woman, not a scientist, saying this crazy stuff? But she was right. And she invented the aquarium to prove it. So her real interest, though, as she got older, like a lot of us in this room, was conservation. And she developed a sustainable aquaculture in Sicily and used tanks to capture local fish, grow them, and repopulate them in overfished out areas. So this is a woman not long ago that thought of conservation and aquaculture and restocking the animals in the wild. And I just found her work fascinating for being so early and a pioneer in the aquarium world.
Did she write about paper novelists? You know,
Yeah, her book. She has 2 books, and that's where one of them was about that.
about paper novelists?
Uh-huh. And these pictures here, I'm just kind of throwing it in the middle because we're talking about old aquariums. And I didn't have pictures of what her aquarium looked like, but I was lucky enough to tour Gary Bagnall's museum of antique aquariums. And I just took a few pictures to kind of show people, you know, the history of the aquarium is very long. And there is lots and lots of beautiful old aquariums. And if you ever get the chance to go to Gary Bagnall's collection in the aquarium museum he's trying to open. He had some incredible aquariums and little decorations and stuff that I just found fascinating. And of course, these aren't what it looked like what she was working with, but that's Gary himself and his history museum. He has not just aquarium supplies, all pet supplies, dogs, cats, and birds, and hamsters, and any kind of pet supply. He collected it and is building a big museum close to here. Okay, these are just a few other women that I don't go in much depth, but I wanted to toss them out to you just because they are important in the history. This one is Maris Kingsley. And what was interesting about her is she came from a family of adventurous travelers, but the guys wouldn't let her come along. And her brothers and dad was out tromping around in the jungle, left her at home. So she went by herself to Africa. She actually, you know, discovered some fish and had those fish named after her. And like Chromotilapia Kingsley, that's amazing. Yes. And this was booked, you know, women weren't never traveled alone. Well, she was actually out there and was helping the locals and natives, and was quite an adventurous woman. I'd like to do a lot more research on her, but this is some of the basics about her. Okay, this is another couple. Both of them were ichthyologists, and they did a lot of work together. They worked a lot on South American catfish, and they collected them and brought them back. And another historical woman in the hobby. What was her name? You researched that for me, and I already forgot. What was it? Rosa. Rosa, thank you. He's helping me develop my talk, so I have to put this new stuff in. And her name was Rosa. This is her husband. And yeah, there's her name on this one, Rosa. They're both ichthyologists, and they studied under Agassiz at Harvard. Great. And of course, this woman's probably more familiar to a lot of us, Evelyn Trevose. She's a British ichthyologist, very well known for her work at the British Museum. And she's described a lot of the African cichlids. You specifically probably have heard the fish named after her, Labiotrephes trevose. She's very well known, more recent woman in the hobby, died in '93. But this woman, this is where I started. This guy, what got me to do this talk. I was just going to do the whole talk on her, And then I found all these other women that were equally fascinating and neglected in the history of our hobby. And so I'm growing this talk out to include more and more important women. But this is my first interest. And if you don't know who this is Ida Mellon. And she's an American acquarist. And she wrote a lot of books. And I have some pictures from some of her work. But the basic information on her, she's my personal heroine. She was born in 1877, died in 1970. And she started out, she was educated, went to college, was a law reporter. And then in 1908, she went to the Woods Hole Marine Biological Institute to study. And that's where started her deep interest in the fish.
Helen, I have a question.
Sure.
So her last name is Mellon. Is she related to when you hear people talk about the Carnegie Mellon?
No, it's spelled differently.
Okay.
Now, she was from a very working class background. I get to that. She was not a rich person. She had no connections or anything. And she worked all of this herself from the ground up and no family connections. So back then, as it is now, you got to know people to get in, to have doors open for you. And she couldn't really get her foot in the door at the aquarium. And so she started at the very, very bottom of the, just a cleaning person, worked her way up into the New York Aquarium, where essentially she was running the whole show because she had this incredible way with people. And she could talk to the public and make the aquarium and the fish accessible to the common man. And she didn't talk down to them or over their head. And so everyone running the aquarium were like guys and scientists, and then, they're back in their offices, but not connecting with the people. And she worked her way up to the point where she was the face of the New York Aquarium. And the men who were running the show kind of didn't like that, because she was getting a lot of attention and she was becoming very visible. She had one of the very first radio call-in talk shows about fish in like 1929 in New York City. And, talking to the public and presenting this as a public, kind of hobby that women and children could enjoy. And that was really taking it out of the hands of men and the scientists. So this is her. She worked with fish like this. She's hand feeding a walking catfish while the people watch. And she knew what got people's attention, and she was really good as far as catching their eye, showmanship of it all. And until 1929 is when it all came to the head at the aquarium. And they ended up running her off because she was essentially gaining too much popularity and power, and the guys in control did not like that. So she lost her job, got fired. She went to tour Europe to study public aquariums through Europe. And in 1930, she became an author and started publishing her own books on the tropical fish hobby. And that was very early on, and not a lot of people were talking to the common man. If there were books out there, they might have been not available to regular folks. So this is her article in 1931 in National Geographic magazine. And these pictures were the ones in the magazine. And I just found them captivating. And I can just imagine how exciting that children and adults would be seeing these beautiful pictures and knowing that these could be something they could do in their homes. And back then, they didn't call them tropical fish, they called them toy fish. So her article is called Toy Fish in National Geographic. Okay. So at this point, if you'll bear with me, I want to read you a little bit of her writing that kind of explains where I was coming from with this whole talk. This is in her own words. I am a 47-year-old woman, poor and headed for the poorhouse as far as I can see. Can't make a living wage. I am called a successful woman, but what irony. The New York standard of success is a person is being able to make the world pay his price. The best I have been able to do is get my employers to agree to pay me half of what I'm worth and then repudiate the amount. I am 47 years old and I have the ability to write. I have been called the best educated woman in the United States. I have the energy, ambition, personality, and I'm told charm, yet I cannot make a living wage. While others' incomes have tripled to meet the tripled cost of living, mine has barely doubled. My salary has increased by not quite 100%, while my rent has increased by over 200%. Am I stultifying my powers, warping my gifts like the Chinese woman's foot in a vice? And to see these words 100 years ago, and women still face a lot of the same problems in industry and careers. And as a woman who owned a tropical fish store, when I started in 92, I couldn't get a bank loan. My stepdad had to co-sign for me. And, I couldn't sign a lease. I had to have a man sign the lease. This was 1992. So, things are changing in our hobby. Women are becoming more powerful and accepted in the hobby. But a lot of what she says still run true to me. And I found it really interesting that 100 years later, a woman could say almost those same words in different positions and have that be accurate. So, in conclusion about her, in 1916, a 41-year-old woman with little scientific education became the secretary of the New York Aquarium. Working her way up, she became the first female officer, and she realized her lifelong dream of pursuing a career in biological sciences and broke with limitations and low expectations surrounding her sex and class background. In 1930, she left and pursued a career in hobby writing, being the foremost popular expert on aquarium fish and domestic cats in the United States. So essentially, she was driven out of the organized aquarium industry, if you call it that, and had to become an author to support herself. But she persevered, and I discovered her, and I discovered her books on the table at the Babes auctions, and I just became fascinated with her. And I think she's a pretty much inspirational woman. So now we're going to move a little bit more recent. Another woman I found truly, truly inspirational. It's a terrible picture. At this point, there are no books. These ladies aren't written down. This is only through club newsletters. And this is the first African-American aquarist in the United States of any note. And she was very noteworthy. She was born, her name is Josephine White. She was born in 1916, and her dad was a farmer, a huge family. She was the youngest of 9 kids. Again, class, no money to pursue an education or a hobby like this, where she came from. And she married at 18, had 4 daughters, was widowed. Then she remarried and had a son who was very into tropical fish too. His name is Walter, and her and Walter were in the Midwest in the 50s and then into the 60s with Walter. I believe it might have been St. Louis or someplace in the middle of the country. There's basically, as we look around this room, not very many Black folks in the hobby, and it was really amazing that these people were very successful at what they did. And Josephine herself was the charter founding member of the AKA in 1961. And she bred angels and discus and tetras and barbs in the 50s. And if you think about someone breeding discus back then, I mean, it was such a new fish and such a challenging fish. She was a very successful aquarist in her own right. And then she raised her son up to keep doing it, which I thought that was really cool. And she had time and money in the 1950s because her kids were grown enough that she could get out and do fish. And so she bred these fish and did this as her own hobby once she got, to the point where she had the time to spend. She died in 1978 at the age, 1978 at age 62. She was a VP, vice president on the board in the International Beta Congress. She was a famous, an author, a judge, and the Duluth Aquarium Society published a booklet of her articles, which I just want to put out there. If anybody ever sees it, I will pay big bucks for that. I would love to see it. But that's the only place she ever was even recognized or known, was in these club newsletters, and that's where our history is going to fall through the cracks if people like us don't care enough to record it. And I think the first Black actress of note is definitely something we want to keep track and understand how she influenced the hobby, and she did real well with the hobby. The next woman is a local woman, homegirl, Kathy Springer, and she was from Los Gatos, California, founding member of the ACA, and very early into Mbuna and breeding cichlids. And the rusty cichlid is named after her. This fish here, Geotrophus springeri, a monotypic species, and they named it after her. I thought that was really cool. And she was breeding these fish in the mid 60s here in California. She started with Oscars and Angels, and she started messing with tropical fish in the first place because her baby daughter had colic and kept her up all night. She had to stay up with the baby, so she got fish to have something to do while she's staying up with the sick baby. And she got into African cichlids and Mbuna very, very early on. And this picture before this I showed you, that's her with, we believe that's Pablo Dovii, famous here in California. And then this is her in her backyard. She was a prolific writer for TFH magazine in 1969. She had an article, and also Jim had these newsletters from the San Francisco Aquarium Society, and she had a column in 1970 in the San Francisco Aquarium Society newsletter, and that was real interesting to see some of her writing. And she had a pool in her backyard, as you can see here, and in that pool she kept Pseudotrophus elongatus, Trophiops, Catfurtoni, Melanochromis, Petrotilapia trident tiger. And indoors, she was breeding Pseudotrophia zebra, Fulliborni, Travasse, and Aratus. This is pretty early on in the African cichlids coming into the hobby. She was with it from the very beginning. And she's from right around here. Now this is Libby Young Warren. She's a betta breeder and one of the founding members of the IBC, International Betta Congress. She started with fish in 1953 because her third grade daughter Elaine brought home some guppies from school, and then she started in this lifelong hobby. What she was really known for and good at in the hobby, working with bettas, it was very exacting work with the record keeping, cleaning, small broods, working the fish room. You can see some of their fish room there. And these are pictures of her and her husband in their fish room. And you see all the separate little jars of bettas, keeping them all separate. They had a lot of trophies. They were very good betta breeders. And what she developed is called the Libby betta. They had huge round tails that were 3 times the size of the body. And the anal and dorsal fins were 3 times the body's width. So we take these kind of bettas for it, we take it for granted now. But think at the beginning of the hobby, this was kind of something that she saw in her tanks and developed through selective breeding into the fish that we see now everywhere, ubiquitous. But she's kind of responsible for that. All right, this is our next woman. Y'all might be familiar with Dr. Joanne Norton. She's a fancy live bearer and angelfish genetics expert. She wrote very prolifically for TFH, FAMA, and the Aquarium magazine. And she created many new strains of live bearers. A founding member of the American Live Bearer Association, and she wrote lots of fish books. And the fish that she's credited with bringing into the hobby is called the Imperial Swordtail. And that's her fish room. Look, it's as clean as Pam Chen's fish room. Eat off that floor. Shiny. And then that's the Imperial Swordtail. And these are some articles she wrote and did some line drawings about what she's working with and what she's trying to develop to get a more of a veil tail look to them through her selective breeding. And this was all going on, in her fish room. Look what she developed. That's just such a spectacular fish. Okay, next we have Thelma Simpson. And she set up a retail store in her own home and did commercial breeding operations in Gardena, California. And she developed and sold worldwide the very first high-fin swordtails. And her swordtails started the fancy live bearer hobby in the 60s and were the basis for countless new strains. The earliest photo of her high-fin sword that ever appeared is a picture in the LA Aquarium Society bulletin. So these women in California were cutting edge on the hobby in the 60s. And that's the Simpson swordtail. That's a tiny little picture, but you kind of get an idea of how spectacular they are. And then that brings us to a little bit more modern times. This is the babes in the cichlid hobby. That's the group that Pam Marsh and Pam Chen and I started in 1994 in the bar on Sunday after the ACA in San Antonio. And so this year was our 30th anniversary. And in 30 years, we've raised about $225,000 for conservation. We all get in this hobby for different reasons, but we stay for different reasons. And what has made me stay is the people, the friendship, the camaraderie, and most importantly, I'm really proud of our work with conservation and what we've done to teach people. Yes?
What kind of conservation are you doing?
Well, okay, we have these funds called the Guy Jordan Fund and the Paul Loisel Fund, and they have like $100,000 in them, and they give away the interest to students doing research projects on conservation or on learning about the cichlids. And so they apply for a grant, and then they get like $2,000-3,000 to study the fish in that area. And it's one thing.
Fish conservation.
Uh-huh.
Is it fish conservation? Oh,
It's all cichlids. We're cichlid people.
Okay.
I mean, I like those other fish, but that's what we're working for is
Yeah.
the American Cichlid Association. I have been to 37 ACA conventions in a row, never missed one since 1987. And it's real important to me that we lead this hobby on to the next generation. And I feel that the work that us girls have done helps pass it on, get more people into it. So this is what we're kind of infamous for. We have a late night auction, and we give away free booze and get the guys all liquored up. And we have like the coolest of cool fish, and it's all run by women. So we have women auctioneer, women runners, women at the computer. The whole thing is women run, and we try to talk them into dressing just a little bit, tiny bit sexy or cute or something. And here it is midnight. They've been having free shots all night. They end up paying 3 or 4 times the regular price for that full fish because we're in there having fun. So every year we do this, and this year, quite unexpectedly, our dollar value doubled. In 2.5 hours, we did $15,000. But I must say, that money, half of it, was from the Chicago Cichlid Club. And we do this thing called the mystery fish, where we have some sort of fish-related item in a box. and we auction it off. And the clubs kind of fight over the right to buy it. Chicago paid $4,000 to look at the mystery fish and get it, and then they donated it back. And then we sold it again, and they bought it for $4,000 again. So we got $8,000 of that 15,000 was from the Chicago boys. But you know that money still is going to go for conservation and research, and everything that we do is for the betterment of the hobby. And that club just had some disposable income, and they used us as a way to get it out there. So what I'm doing here, I like to joke that I'm selling that guy, but if a fish guy wants to help us with the auction, we make him wear a dress. So he's a runner wearing a dress so he can hang out with the girls. And then this is the other thing that I really like to do at ACA. The last night on Sunday, everybody who's left gets together and goes out to eat, and we call it the Babes Banquet. And it's about the only time I'm not hitting them up for money, so they're allowed to just relax and don't have to buy another 10 raffle ticket. We do a lot of 50-50 raffles, so I'm always out there hawking the raffle tickets. And then this is our silent auction table with our hero auctionings. And I'd like y'all to notice on that back wall, that's a quilt made out of fish t-shirts.
Cool.
Yeah, and I bought one and it had only 12 t-shirts, and I paid like, I don't know, $350, $400. I don't remember what that one went for, but I bet it went for a lot of money. It was really, really cool. And so these tables, you see, people bring stuff and donate it, and we sell it in the form of a silent auction. And we do that on Thursday and Friday at the National Convention. And we work those tables and sell that stuff, and that's the other way we make money, besides for that live auction.
Where is the national convention at?
Well, it's always in a different city every year. This next year, the gossipy rumor is at this point, maybe it might be in San Antonio. It hasn't been officially confirmed, but that's a word on the street. It's going to be ACA, AKA, LALA, FEDAS, and FOTOS, which Federation of Texas Aquarium Societies. So it'll be 5 conventions in one. And what's happening, and I don't understand economics, is fish conventions are in passe and they're not making money, and they're putting up money to do it, and lots of clubs have lost money. So the thing about bringing 5 clubs together, you have all those different people, so you have enough to make critical mass. And I went to a convention like that in Louisville. That was very successful. And then this last year, I went to the ALA, AKA one in Florida. Very fun. So it's fun to mix all the different fish people together. They all like to have a good time. So we highly recommend that you consider. Next year it's going to be in June. None of this is announced. This is top secret. Don't say where you heard it. We're still working on it, but that's the gossip. So this is the best fish friends a girl can have. It's East Coast Pam and West Coast Pam. From South Carolina, North Carolina, and Pam Chin is from right here in this town. And we girls have been friends for well over 30 years, and it's just the most rewarding thing to have friends with the same values and goals about helping save the hobby and the fish. And we had Pam Chin win CARES Conservation Person of the Year 2016. And I'm very proud of her for that work. And the babes themselves have been honored by CARES. And I didn't tell you that convention next year, the theme is going to be CARES, conservation. The whole convention is going to be based on conservation. And every single group is going to bring in speakers with a conservation bend to it. So that's the first time there's ever been a hobbyist convention with a theme of conservation. And it really warms my heart.
But don't tell anybody.
Yeah, no, nobody knows this stuff. And this is us 3 girls in Africa. We went to Africa, Tanganyika out of Zambia in 2002. And now we're going back in October, and just about 2 or 3 weeks from now, we're going to go to Tanzania. We're being Pam Chin, Pam Marsh, me, Jim Fish, John Crepper, Rusty Wrestle, maybe a few other people. So basically a bunch of fish nerds that already know each other and get along, and we're going to go to the lake and look at all the cool fish and have a good time. Very, very fun. to travel with people that you love and trust. It's very fun. So this is the babes to Africa in 2002. We'll have a new picture and a new talk after this year. And this is us at the airport in Zambia. If you don't recognize it, that's Doogie, Steve Lundblad from the Wet Spot in 2002 when he still looked like Doogie Howser. And then this is us at the bar in Zambia. This is my favorite picture.
Oh,
Those who don't know me don't know I don't drink, but I do not have to be drunk to crawl around on the bar and bother people. I'll get up there and crawl around quite sober, no problem. So if you look at this picture, there's Doogie in the back dancing with his arms in the air. There's me crawling on the bar to the cute guy I had a crush on. And there's this bartender going, get these people out of here. She's out about her fill of crazy drunk fish people. We have a real good time. And then we have made trips with the girls to Mexico. This is up in Chiapas with Sandy Moore from Seagrass Farms, a waterfall called Misoha. Beautiful, beautiful collecting in Chiapas. I personally like the New World cichlids better than the Africans, but I love them all. But I really go crazy for the fish. Mexico, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Honduras. Those are the fish that really get me going. And really, when people say, why have you been in this hobby so long? I'm going to admit right now, I don't even have a fish tank right now. I broke them all down during COVID. I put them back up. But I still love the fish. I still love the people. I still love the hobby. And I still see friends that I have known forever. And it just makes me so happy. And so, I'll get a tank again at some point. But right now, my bulk of my hobby is going around giving this talk and trying to get people motivated to keep the clubs going, because that's really what gives me the most joy in the hobby is the club and the people. And these are people I consider mentors and dear friends. Dr. Wayne Leibel in the middle is no longer with us, and he was basically the bitch sweetheart. We loved him more than anybody, and he's really missed. And of course, that's Steve Lundblad. The thing about this, you see these people once a year for 30, 40 years, you really follow their life and become dear friends, even though you don't live in the same town. And this is our 20th anniversary babes t-shirt. This year was our 30th anniversary. Pam makes these t-shirts and draws them up and everything. And then this is a funny story. When we were in Africa, Pam Marsh and Pam Chin like gin and tonics. And so Pam Chin was real paranoid they weren't going to have any limes in Zambia. So she bought lime Kool-Aid. And they made this drink with Lake Tanganyika water, gin, and lime Kool-Aid. And it was called a bitch slap. Drinking that the whole time. So I'm hoping when we go this time that we'll have bitch slaps on the house at the new place, because that was a pretty funny drink.
like the,
Okay, this is where I'm going to take y'all to next. This is okay. First off, this is a fish group on Facebook, Girls for Fish. I was just a member. I kind of stumbled into it. I'm into supporting women in the hobby. I found this group. Okay, this woman right here founded this group. Her name was Brittany Cox, and she died on January 1st, 2022, very suddenly in her sleep. She would have been 37 years old.
Wow.
And the reason I bring her into this talk is because it's hard to believe looking at that sweet face, but she was bullied and harassed and made to feel unwanted in the fish hobby online. She never made it to a fish club. She didn't even know about fish clubs. She did not know about fish auctions. But she was a super advanced breeder with 70 tanks, and these are some of her fish that she bred herself. And this is without any access to the hobby or auctions or even the fish books, basically. She was floundering around on her own without any support. So she founded this group here, Girls for Fish. And the thing about Girls for Fish, she wanted it to be equality, where women could come in and not be made to be feel stupid or ridiculed when they asked a question as a beginner. And when she was in those African cichlid peacock groups and stuff, they were making her feel dumb and pushing her away because they were so competitive and not friendly to newbies. So she was determined to make an effort to open up the hobby to women. And the way, and this is just cliche stereotypes, but women are inclusive and helpful and family nurturing. And the guys, especially on the internet, get this whole competition thing going where they view anybody else doing what they're doing as competition and not sharing. And that's what fish clubs, we are family. We're together to help each other. We're nurturing the new hobbyists, the younger people we see in this room, and that happens in person. That doesn't translate to the fish clubs on the internet. You can't really have those kind of feelings on your internet fish club. So Girls for Fish is open to men or women. Anybody who wants to join on Facebook, feel free to join. Just a regular old fish group where we talk about fish and show fish pictures, tell fish lies. So what I'm gonna say is women can have their own pleasure room. We don't need no stinking guy to make us a pleasure room. We got our own fish rooms with whatever fish we want to keep. And it doesn't have to be a male-dominated hobby. If we can kind of encourage the women as beginners so they don't feel so threatened or run off by so much. So this is it. They needed the babes. They just didn't know it. You know, they had to get the babes in the hobby so we could take them and protect them while we're out collecting fish, beating off the vicious flamingos. And this is my natural place in the hobby, surrounded by fish guys, where I want to be, having fun with all my friends and partying down every year with the same guys, having a good time. I'm going to Africa with 2 of those guys in that picture. And this is one of our late night charity auctions where we're having fun and raising heck at a fish convention. And here I do acknowledge I am Queen of the Fishes. I'm wearing my crown tonight. For those who didn't know, I accept the title of Queen of the Fishes. You needed a queen, you just didn't know it. And this is back to my fish store. After they stole the live fish, I made exotic mating ritual sign, and I stole that one.
It's in so much.
And so then I made this sign, put it on the stage. How many eyes? That's the most massage part was a pull right into my pocket. Because I knew that there was something going on in this place. So Amazonia Aquariums, like I said, closed in 2012. I'm really happy to be out of retail and back into the hobby as a hobbyist and not doing retail. It turned me into a misanthrope, and I love people. But by the end of it, I was ready to choke a few of those fish murdering. You know, when people don't have the same values, you tell them, oh, well, don't mix those fish, and then I go to PetSmart and throw all those Africans in with those South Americans, and it's a study in frustration nonstop when you're working retail, and you're trying to teach them about biotopes and conservation and big picture. So, in conclusion, I want to encourage you to spread the love of the hobby, be inclusive, mentor the new people, reach out to new people, and share the hobby. It doesn't have to be a dying hobby if we're out there pushing it, proselytizing our love for the hobby. There's so much to offer for all kinds of people, and I want to encourage diversity and inclusion in the fish hobby. Thank you.
Just a lot of love from whoever is on our live stream. They loved your funny signs. Comments are, she was a fun speaker. Thanks for being there.
Very much.
Did you close the job or no?
No, I closed in 2012. The bottom line is, I'm talking about prejudice against women. I had moved my shop 5 times and taken out 5 loans to do it. I had just paid back the last $75,000 loan each year, but I needed like 500 tanks. I needed $125,000 to $150,000 loan. They wouldn't give it to me. So I closed it. I mean, I couldn't see moving again 500 tanks. I was already sick of the hobby, not to cast aspersions, but parasiticids, dyed fish, seaform fish, flower horns, it all disgusted me. And I was ready to be away from the hobby. And back hanging out with people who are into what I'm into, which is conservation of threatened species of fish that are already existing. Not that I showed you the beautiful peacocks. I don't pass judgment on those hybrids. That woman loved her fish and they're beautiful and I see the value. It's just not where my values lie in the hobby. And as a store, if you didn't sell parrot cichlids and dyed fish and tattooed fish, you have a hard time succeeding because that's
You gotta be at a certain level in the hobby before you care about a drab brown fish more than the
Yeah.
other one.
exactly. And I'm all about sex brown fish, let me tell you. I love that. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you again, Caroline. Thanks everyone for coming. We're gonna take a 15-20 minute break and then we'll be back at the auction. Get all these lights on. Have a good night, YouTube. Thanks.
It was nice talking with you.
Nice talking with you. Sarah?